This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your normal partners in crime, Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn. Aaron, there's no more football for the Bills left. How do you feel?
It's void. I feel like there's a big void in my life. I've lost something close and dear to me, but no, it's all right. I was excited about the offseason, so we're kicking it off here. I'm way behind on the draft stuff, so I'm just trying to play catch up in some of my free time that I have, just trying to catch up on the draft. So it's a little bit good in that sense to get caught up, but I saw some ads for the games coming up this weekend and like blindsided that football still exists outside of the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, it's been a little painful. And there's been things on both sides. I haven't quite grasped that there's going to be football in 2 days and the Bills aren't part of it. So that's going to be weird when it happens. I didn't realize how much time I spent at the tail end of the 6-10 season last year doing prep work for the draft and free agents, and how much I was looking back at like dates of things that I was doing stuff. And now I went to do a mock draft the other night, and I swear I knew like 6 guys' names. I
can only do like 3 round mocks before I run out of names.
Yeah, I'm like, I just don't know any of these people. I don't know any of the guys, and I'm just so behind. So I'm cramming. I'm trying to get to review stuff and reading all the different reports and everything. So it'll be fun to catch up on that. And we have plenty of time to do that. Then we'll get into those fun things as the time comes. But tonight, Aaron and I are going to be going through a review of the season and our year-end awards. So, if you're listening to this wearing a tuxedo or a ball gown, that totally makes sense. This is awards season. So we'll be going through position by position, doing a little bit of a breakdown of the good and the bad of what happened on each of them. I got to do a fun exercise like this with our friend Pat Moran on his show as well, and told him we were going to do something pretty similar, and then we're going to do some end of the year awards of who we think really stood out in a couple different categories. So before we jump in, anything else you want to set the table for?
No, yeah, I think everybody in this week is going to be doing similar type of content. This is just our breakdown on that. I think this is kind of just the natural way to talk it out and wrap up a season before we start diving into the next season here and put this year behind us, is to wrap it up with grades and awards. But to the point of catching up, I do want to just touch on that real quick. Catching up with the draft process is over with Cover One. Those guys have already been ripping into the draft season work, breaking down players. New players are coming out every day. Eric is really finding some gems. And I'll tell you, if you're new to Cover One or haven't been involved in a draft season yet with Cover One, all the guys do great write-ups and all that stuff. You find out about all different types of players, Bills targets or not. Eric does an incredible job of breaking down tendencies of Bills play callings, tendencies of things they're looking for, archetype players, things like that, guys to keep an eye on that the Bills are going to be pretty focused on in the draft process. So keep an eye on the Cover One main feed for guys that Eric's talking about. And when you see him post about a guy like the safety he was talking about today, dig a little deeper, because there's something to not just this is a good mid-round guy, but this is a good particular fit for the Buffalo Bills, and this would be a guy they're targeting because of all these things off field. So he dives into the details of why this regime's targeting. And the more years and experience we have of having this regime in place, the better he's getting at it. So I encourage everybody to follow closely, and whatever players he's pointing out or writing about, definitely take a deep look, and it usually pays off in the end.
No, it's phenomenal. And some of the connections he makes on players and the reasons that guys fit, or the reasons that they might be a good, matchup for what we're looking for, what we've done in the past. That archetype exercise last year was really exciting to be able to kind of go through and see, we do have a type. There are things that fit there. And I'm sure we'll further kind of hone and adapt that as we go this year. And looking forward to kind of connecting the dots on those. So it's a great call. And, like you said, check out Christian Page, check out Russell Brown. Got a lot of guys, adding guys like Zach Hicks and Brad Kelly to the squad this year. Just a lot of guys with a lot of knowledge. So looking forward to it. You can check them out in the Cover One Premium Slack channel. We have channels going up for everything. We have an entire channel just for mock drafts. We have a channel for draft prospects. We have a channel for the Bills, for general discussion, for all kinds of different stuff. So a lot of fun things coming over. Check us out. You can find it at cover1.net. Jump aboard, become a premium member, all kinds of awesome stuff. But now let's take a step back. We've had 4 full days to digest what happened. I actually found it difficult in some of this exercise not to let the most recent game paint a picture, good or bad, over the season-long grades, and I changed a couple multiple times.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a fun exercise to talk through. So let's start off right off the top. We'll start off with the offense.
Sure.
And let's start off with, we'll go quarterback last. Let's start off with the offensive line. I think that was the core of what we, were probably the most surprised by on my side with Brandon Beane, bringing in 7 undrafted or unrestricted free agents plus a second round pick. Plus ended up being a trade for an undrafted free agent with Ryan Bates. You're bringing in higher dollar guys like Mitch Morse and Ty Nsekhe, and then more value guys like your Spencer Longs, your Quentin Spains, John Felicianos, and overall a significant overhaul. And that I thought that, there was a little bit of challenge. You lost Jeremiah Searles from a depth standpoint. You lost Adrian Waddle. We lost time with Mitch Morris during camp. We lost him for a couple games, lost Ty Nsekhe for several parts. So I think it was hard to get a great feel for the gelling and, continuity that it really takes for a great line. But we were so bad the year before that, I think you brought it up all season long and all during the offseason. We went from absolutely horrible and arguably the worst line in the league to maybe average. And that's kind of how I saw this group.
Yeah, and that's right around where I think my grade is. These grades are tough because I did try to make it as even of a playing field and not give too many curves. I wanted to give a curve, right, to the offensive line from where they were, all the stuff you explained, where they were a year ago. And I tried to kind of keep it, all right, no, this is a fresh team and it doesn't matter where they were a year ago. I got to grade them for who they are. And I think overall it did become an average group. And that's kind of what we anticipated this being, was from one of the worst to one of the average. And I think, Brandon Beane said in the closing statements that they are going to try to bring back everybody they can, but also if there's a spot that they can improve, they're going to do it. And I expect to see some of that along the offensive line. So I don't think they're done there. I think they're pretty happy with some of the pieces they've added. I think they're still, he was pretty telling about the Cody Ford having versatility to move around a little bit. I thought him just even kind of opening that door with Ford tells me that maybe they're not super happy with how right tackle played out this year. And kind of all that said and done, I think if we were going to get down into even a more micro version of grading the individual performances, some of these are probably better than the overall grade for the unit was this year. And we'll talk about a guy, Deion Dawkins, who was close to my most improved player here this year. I think he would have been one of those guys rated maybe higher than the overall grade, but I went with a C+. I think overall they did some nice things. I think it's a hard task for pass protection to block for Josh Allen still at this point in his career. I think that he provides some issues. I think Singletary made him look a little bit better at times. I think when we go back and look at the year, there'll be some stuff Singletary did that the run blocking wasn't fantastic, but he found a way to make plays, and we saw that in the Texans game. So I think there's going to be some bad film out there when it gets all broken down, but I think it's a huge improvement from a year ago. We know Jordan Mills just sliding all over the field, totally missing blocks. Guys were pretty much doing their jobs as expected, and I hope to see continued improvement. Man, if we can go be doing this next year and I can say, hey, this is a B- B unit, I'm going to be a very happy guy if you have a slightly above average offensive line.
No, I was in the exact same ballpark. I flipped between a C+ and a B-, and I tried to use the grading scale that C is average, C is a starter, C is you are, right at that. People use replacement level like it's some horrible thing. We were so far below replacement level in the past that seems like an upgrade. So if you are making a net positive or any bump on the team, I put you in that B. That's words like good and positive. And then if you're getting up into elite, all-pro, Pro Bowl level, that's in the A. If you're hurting the team or we need to actively seek out replacing you, that was where I got into a D. And then if you were ruining things, that was an F. And we don't have Vlad Dukas and Jordan Mills anymore, so I thought it was better than that, but I went with a B-.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my grading scale basically kind of was around the same area as you did. And I'll go ahead and tell you right now that nobody got below a C-. None of the units. So for Bills fans, that's a good thing, because last year I would have handed out some Ds.
Multiple.
Yeah, there would have been some Ds dropping. But for me, I think at the least, that speaks to the job Brandon Beane's done and the depth of this team, that I think at the very least they have good to average players across, or units across the team this year.
No, I think it's a great call. And moving on to the next position group here, we'll just keep working our way up. The offensive side is one of the lowest ones that I graded, but still we're going from horrible to just below average. So for the tight end group, we went from, a world of Jason Kroom and Charles Clay into a full new squad, 2 draft picks in Dawson Knox and Tommy Sweeney, 2 free agent signings in Lee Smith and Tyler Kroft. I think there was a sizable material upgrade from what we had before. Knox had a lot of inconsistency, but almost 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, and obviously some awesome highlight level plays. Sweeney didn't get a ton of run during the regular season, showed some promise in the preseason, and then that final game against the Jets. Lee Smith was his normal positive blocking impact and no impact on the passing game, and had some penalty issues. And then Tyler Kroft couldn't stay healthy. And I'm open to the idea that maybe he can have a healthy offseason and build some chemistry with Josh Allen. But overall, I had him at a C-. I thought they were still a below average unit. There's potential on all fronts. I think that having 2 rookies and a guy who was injured means that we might not need to go sign some huge big money guy to make a decent improvement next year. They might be able to improve simply by the 2 rookies being better into their second year and Tyler Kroft being healthy. But it still was a below average unit on the season this year.
Yeah, no, I have the exact same thing. I put him at a C- as well, for the same reasons. I do think that they're not as better as, I don't think it's as much of an improvement at that positional group as a lot of people think. And I probably disagree on the level that you think it's an improvement. I don't know that there was much more of a receiving threat in the unit this year than Charles Clay was a threat, whether or not he got the ball or what he did with the ball. But Dawson Knox had consistency issues, the same frustrating consistency issues I had with Charles Clay. Drop big passes, drive killing drops, things like that. What Dawson Knox was able to do that I really never saw from Charles Clay in his time in the Bills was any of the yards after catch or the big exciting plays, stiff arming the guy in Cincinnati. Some of those things I think he provided, and you expected maybe to see that on every play with Knox. And I'm sure age comes into, he probably didn't outperform Charles Clay really in any way in his time here, but the fact that Knox is so young and he has so much potential, I think that probably jades how we view him. But yeah, no, C- overall. I think the area they maybe improved the most in is blocking. And actually Charles Clay was a pretty good blocker, but I think the unit as a whole was better at blocking this year. And obviously the addition of Lee Smith, bringing him back, helped secure some of that. So C- isn't a knock. I think they most of the time were doing their jobs. There was times where all of them weren't. Lee Smith struggled with the penalties for a little while. That kept him kind of off the field for a game. That kind of was a hiccup in the middle of the year. Knox with his consistency issues. Kroft with even being able to get on the field. Tommy Sweeney is fine for where he's at, but he's not a guy that we wanted to see on an NFL field this year. He's just not that guy. He's a development guy. But one thing I'll say about this tight end group looking forward is you and I sat on those benches at St. John Fisher this summer, and man, when you look over at that tight end room, they have a type.
It's hysterical how similar they all look.
Whether or not they are different types of athleticism, what they all look the same. It was like you could swap jerseys and I wouldn't know who any of those guys would
be. That tall, thick, 6'5", 250, that they all look like that. They're all, well built physically, similar height. And it's funny you bring that up with the next position here. People talk about, can't you move, Duke Williams over to tight end? And Duke Williams is 6'2", 216. All of these guys are 6'5", 6'6", 250, 260. It's a material difference when you see
from what they're looking for at tight end. Yeah.
Yes.
You can move a Duke Williams to some type of H-back tight end role, but it doesn't appear that's what the Bills want. And that was more Charles Clay.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what Charles Clay was. And that didn't seem to be really the direction this team wanted for tight end. And that's why he's no longer here.
Yeah. So let's keep moving on to that same position group here. So another part that got a complete overhaul is the wide receiver group. So we had holdovers from last year with Duke Williams or with Isaiah McKenzie and Robert Foster. Initially with Zay Jones on the opening day roster. We then had new additions with the CFL signing of Duke Williams and then larger financial investment with John Brown, Cole Beasley, and even Andre Roberts. Roberts didn't contribute a ton as a receiver, but added to that group. And it was really major contributions from the top two. You know, John Brown going for 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns, also threw a touchdown and another one in the playoff game. Cole Beasley with I think a relatively quiet season that was better than a lot of people realized. 67 catches for 778 yards and 6 touchdowns. Maybe not the number of catches that some people had initially projected, but almost 800 yards and 6 touchdowns is right there with what anybody would have projected. And then the bottom just fell out. You know, Isaiah McKenzie had 250 yards, Duke Williams 160. Robert Foster had 3 catches for 64 yards on the season, and that's just crazy. Even you and I think were tempering expectations compared to a lot of people who were trying to argue he was going to be some hidden gem wide receiver 1. So I had a tough time with this one because I think Brown and Beasley both earned really good grades, great value for the deals they signed, huge additions for Josh Allen. But there was such a drop off afterwards. I went with B-. I thought that they were good. I thought they helped. I don't think we had anybody who was a Pro Bowl level. You know, maybe Brown was on that trend at one point if he finished hotter than what he was maybe 12, 13 games into the year. But I ended up going B-, that I thought that we were positive, above average, but still not difference making or all pro or elite.
Yeah, I had him as a C+. I was kind of hovering right around the same idea. I think we're pretty much in the same ballpark here. I think I could have been more easily swayed into a B or greater if John Brown and Cole Beasley finished the year a little bit stronger. And I think the Bills' offensive finish had a lot of variables and a lot of context to why everybody didn't finish strong. But there was a pace at one point where both Brown and Beasley were in for career years. And in a significant way, and it just kind of stalled out. So, and then again, the drop off after those two is just too significant for me to feel comfortable giving the unit as a whole a B. But who knows? There's a lot of people out there on Twitter right now that are saying, hey, if they would have played Duke Williams when I started saying to play Duke Williams on Twitter, then who knows what he would have contributed to the. I really do think they're one regularly contributing guy away from that unit being a B+ unit. If they had one more guy that Josh could lean on with any type of consistency, be a 50 to 60 catch guy in addition to what they've got going on. Like, he doesn't have to have that catches, but be a guy that could be a 50, 60 reception guy to come in. I know everyone's looking for that wide receiver 1. I don't think that's great. If we can find a wide receiver number 1, fantastic. Sure. That'll move this group to maybe an A if Brown and Beasley are your 2s and 3s. But I think you can have a B+ unit with those guys as your top guys and a nice complementary piece to what they're doing on this offense. They just didn't have that at all. There was no third guy with any type of consistency. And the unit as a whole, the drop rate on this team was very high, and that starts at wide receiver. They get more of those targets than anybody else. The drop rate was too high, and a lot of them were in big moments that stalled drives, and you just can't have that. And that's where I think the conversation of we need that number 1 wide receiver, I think they just need to execute their jobs better. And if they could have done a little bit more of that, I could have got them up to a B. But for me, the end of the year on a C+. And that's, again, a huge jump from a unit a year ago that I couldn't even take seriously as an NFL wide receiver.
Oh, yeah, and I think that they showed us some things. I think his willingness to throw those contested catches and jump balls to Duke Williams was interesting for Josh Allen, and that's something I'd like to see next year. The eye candy that Isaiah McKenzie's jet sweep motion created impacted the offense positively. The trouble is we can do better than both of those guys and still accomplish those same things. I know one of the guys, I wish I could remember who it was in the premium Slack channel, threw out the idea that what we really need is Duke Foster or Robert Williams. You need that combination of the guy who's big enough and tough enough to go up for the contested catch, but also fast enough to get away from people and to get some separation. And, I know in the chat here, Joe is bringing up T. Higgins. There are some athletes like that in this draft coming up that I don't think we're going to trade for Julio Jones or trade for Mike Evans or something crazy. But there's some guys in the draft that have that kind of upside. So we'll get into that as the season goes. But I think your grade is very solid as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Moving into the next group, another one. This was one that I had a hard time because I think if you just look at the playoff game, it's easy to get excited about the running back group. But on the season as a whole, there were some challenges. Devin Singletary ended up with 775 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 140 receiving and 2 more touchdowns receiving. Frank Gore had 599 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, if you have a rushing quarterback that scores in the red zone, that can steal a little bit from these guys. So I don't want to hold that against them too much because there were overall, 13 rushing touchdowns as a group. But I thought that there were some challenges. I don't think that we got a great feel for the mix between running backs. It worked better when Gore was the primary and Singletary was the offset and the change of pace, but then it became apparent that Singletary was simply better. But what we found out was that kind of the net trade-off of that was that Gore wasn't that good in a complementary role, and he was the guy who needed the touches to kind of get his rhythm and wear the defense down and get better as the game goes on, and just was never able to really get that going in that complementary role. And I don't know how much of it was the offensive line, if there's a difference in blocking for the two, but I think that how exciting that game was and how legitimately bright the future is, especially for someone like me who was not a fan of Singletary and super glad to be as wrong as I was on what his potential is. I think that potential is real, but I think the season was maybe not quite as awesome as what some people made it out to be from a running back group as a whole. We never used TJ Yeldon at all. And obviously Sonoris Perry was never a factor. I went B- again. I thought there was positive places. I thought that, 5.1 yards carry for Singletary was good. The two of them together at over 1,300 yards is legitimate. And then again, kind of chipping in a little bit of what Josh took away from a rushing touchdown standpoint or rushing production as a whole. But that's another one where I floated in that C+ B- range.
I gave him a B. I think that I agree with a lot of what you said, as the overall group probably doesn't deserve a B, and the production's probably not there when you look at the box score for the year for them to have a B, and I agree with a lot of that. But I think where I was at was mostly this is top-heavy group for me with Devin Singletary and his talent. I think what swayed me was his 1-year development. I think he swayed probably everybody in that organization. When they went into this season, I do think they probably fully expected to keep Shady, but he was a guy like, all right, if this works a little bit, we can get rid of him. And he saw that. I think they had a very clear development plan for Devin Singletary this year. Was we're going to roll with Frank Gore as our primary. He's going to get the primary amount of touches. We're going to sprinkle in Devin Singletary here throughout the year and ramp up his production as we go, take our time slowly. He's getting 3 to 6 carries a game in those first few games and popping off every time the guy touches the ball. And he's making a case for you to keep him on the field, gets hurt, slows down that development, comes back, starts popping them off again. Like you said, that flipped role, that was never their plan for this team. That was never their plan for Frank Gore. Stuff happens in the middle of the season. You're not really prepared to make that change personnel-wise, but you know that it's a change that you have to make. He's the best offensive weapon you have. He's the only guy making plays by himself. So they were put in a weird position, but a good position. It's one of those, all right, this is a tough position to be in, but it's a good one to be in. Frank Gore is not the kind of guy to come in and take complimentary role. I don't know why that is. It's not his role. It won't be his role going forward. He's done as a Buffalo Bill, whatever happens to him. So they need to upgrade that secondary role, but I had to give him a B. Singletary's just too good. From where he started, where he was drafted, I think he's already exceeded his ceiling of what type of running back he can be in this league. And I think that he also showed us that it's a sustainable style of running. This isn't just some flash in a pan, fun rookie guy. He's going to be able to run at this level and be better when he starts to catch the ball with more consistency as a threat out of the backfield catching. He showed great pass protection. There's so much excitement for this guy. His ceiling, I think, is way higher than a lot of us anticipated, and his floor is much higher too. I thought he'd just come into the league and be a nice complimentary back, a little bit of shifty, can break one once in a while, but this is a guy that can carry the ball. I'm not going to say he's a 20 carry a game guy. Derrick Henry's is probably that only guy in the league right now. But I think you can get him 16 carries a game every single game for an entire NFL season and just have a nice complimentary back. And to have drafted that where we drafted him, I think that's crazy because I saw it going the other way around. I thought they were going to draft Devin Singletary and then this offseason get that number one back and let Singletary be the complement. But now I think you have the shoes on the other foot. They got this guy now. You can kind of sit back and get a complimentary guy for him.
Yeah, and Ron brought it up in the chat here. His contact balance and how hard he is to bring down for somebody who's 5'7", barely 200 pounds is crazy. It's really, really impressive. And that I don't think there are bell cow backs hanging out all over the place. Derrick Henry's a monster. Zeke Elliott has some games like that you can get up there 30, 35 touches. He's not that guy, and there's barely any other guys like that. I do think he can be the primary back in a backfield. I think he can have that, 50 to 65% of the touches and get the majority of the touches in most games. And if we add the right, I think, game-breaking presence, a guy with, Singletary has everything that you can't measure really well, the contact balance, the vision, that cutback ability. Heck, that one run where he cut out to the sideline and juked 4 guys to only gain 2 yards, but literally left 4 guys just grasping at air to be able to get all the way out to the sideline. That's awesome. And if we can have somebody who can add that top end elite athleticism for some of the breakaway, I think we could have a really exciting combination going forward. So I think that's spot on, and he is exciting and was right there to be able to move the needle by himself for what the position group is as a whole.
Yeah, no, I think so far, I don't want to spoil it. We'll get right into it, but my best grade on the offensive line, because I do think he was the best weapon, most consistent weapon on this offense all season long. So kudos to him.
And then the next one is the toughest one for me because going into quarterback, you're looking at Josh Allen, and it really goes in what side of it are you looking at? Is it that he went from 52% completion percentage up to 58.8? Is it good to be excited that he went up 6-7 percentage points, or is it you should be concerned that it is second year it was only 58.8? Should you be excited that his touchdown to interception ratio improved greatly and went from 20 touchdowns and 9 picks, and that was a huge step forward, or that he was still only 21st in the league in passing touchdowns? Is it a positive that he still had 9 rushing touchdowns and 500 yards, or is that still a crutch that he wasn't able to lead the offense just passing wise? There are so many things within his season that were legitimate, sizable steps forward that are reasons to be optimistic. And we talked all the time about his humility, his coachability, his willingness to get better, his, in football intelligence and how hard he's worked to be able to take those steps forward, and lots of reasons that he can do that again. But I really struggled in that I ended up going with a C+, but I was almost mad at myself that in most statistical areas, he was below average, and that I think the fact that he led them to 10 wins in 15 games, I'll count, not counting that last game that I think if it mattered, we would have won 11 games. I think that he added a lot with his legs. I think he did well during the season when it mattered, but it's hard not to be clouded by the concern of that final stretch in the fourth quarter and overtime of the playoff game. So I flip-flop back and forth from C- to C+, and I ended up going C+ because I think there were more positives than negatives, but that was the toughest one for me.
It was a tough one for me. I ended up going with C+ as well, and the reason I did was not because of any of his stats. I didn't give a ton of time looking at the stats. For me, it was really who Josh Allen showed us that he is in this season. And some of the things that made my grade a C+ would be seeing him be able to make throws with some touch, seeing him improve that intermediate passing area, seeing him understand a little bit more at the line of scrimmage, being able to lead an NFL offense. He made a lot of good decisions. There's still a lot of the bad Josh, the throw, in that Texans game, lateraling the ball backwards after a run, like some of the hero ball stuff reared its head in some key spots. I think maybe the biggest thing that was of concern to me was we've heard all about fourth quarter Josh and him taking over, and there's a lot of statistics to back up how much better his play is in the fourth quarter. But we saw 3 games that were the biggest games of the year where Josh Allen had a chance with the ball in his hand. The situation leading up to that with all the fourth quarter comebacks and the drives and all those things, we saw him get the ball in his hands in big spots in games to win it, and none of those times he came up over 3. None of those times was he able to go and lead his team to points to win a big game in a big spot. And so I don't think, I think fans want to give him that, like, this guy's a captain fourth quarter. I don't think you can give him that. He is not that guy until he beats the Patriots in that spot, beats the Ravens in that spot. I need to see a signature Josh Allen game in 2020 where it's like, okay, this guy that in a clutch moment, the Deshaun Watson breaking a tackle and making a play, like he needs that signature play. And it took Deshaun a few years. That's a play we saw against the Bills is a definitive one for Deshaun Watson in his career. If he goes on to have a great career and win multiple Super Bowls, they're going to flash back to that moment as his defining moment. Josh Allen needs that. He hasn't had that step yet. So that is the next step for him. But I couldn't go C-. I think he did too many good things. I think he still led this team down. It's the Josh Allen experience. This team's not in winning 10 games with any other normal Bills quarterback that we've had over the last 17 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of that is Josh Allen, and it doesn't show up in the stats, but he makes plays that keep those games alive. That fourth down conversion in the Cowboys game where he just grabs it and makes the first down. That's not going to show up anywhere in the statistics, and it won't make him anywhere outside of the top or the bottom 10 passers, but it's that thing that he has that shows you this guy can be the guy if he can fix some of these other problems that he has. So C+ for me. He is a great leader of men. He found the best thing about Josh Allen this year was he made progress while winning 10 games. His team won 10 games. So he's a winning quarterback. He's got that going for him. He got to experience the playoffs. And there was a lot of great stuff on tape for him to learn from this year. And we saw him develop. We saw him work on some of the things people said he can't do. So I expect a better version of himself again this year. I don't know if it'll be at the leap that he made a year or two, but I think he's going to continue to progress. And it's not linear and something we talk about a lot on this show. But I don't know if time might be running out for Josh if he doesn't take a major leap here in year 3. I think by the end of year 3, we're going to have to be labeling him as a B or B+, or people are going to start losing their minds. He's got to take that next step.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Ron says something similar in the chat. I like that a lot. In that next year, if he's at a B or better, we're going to feel great. And I think that you guys are going to hear me say this throughout the entire offseason as we're building up this roster. There is no one thing that's going to fix this. We need Josh Allen to take a material step forward. All the things that improve are probably half of the equation. The roster, Dable getting better at using it, all the things all together, the improved protection, another complimentary running back with Singletary, another receiving threat. All those things together are half, and the other half is Josh by himself getting better. Now, we need all those things. We probably need to improve protection. We could use an upgrade at tight end, whether that's development or addition. We need multiple additions probably at wide receiver. We need at least one addition at running back. All those things, I think, will allow Brian Dable to call a more creative game and to open up the playbook more. And Josh needs to be better. And if all those things happen, it could be really, really exciting. But I think they all need to happen. I think they need more weapons. I think they need to get more creative. And I think there was a piece of it that we saw in the playoff game and some of the other pieces what Brian Dable knew in the back of his mind, that, hey, he's not quite ready to do everything yet. I think there were times he got too conservative and decided ahead of time that, I don't want to put Josh in that situation, when he probably should have pushed the envelope a little bit more. And then there were other times where he called, the right plays and did those things. So he needs to open that up as well, because we need to find out, good or bad, we have to know everything that he's got in front of him and available at his capacity. And I agree with you, spot on. You've said it for a year and a half running now. We're going to know by the end of 2020 what we have with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I think most of the development is going to be in his hands, and that the franchise needs him to take that step forward. I think you look at, I argue this with a lot of people all the time. Look at any roster in the NFL any given year, best teams ever. Teams have weaknesses, flaws. One of their units is a C- when they do their end grades too. You know, like everybody's got some spot on their roster that's a weakness they haven't been able to address or haven't drafted well for. Every team has an imperfect part, but teams have done more than the Bills have with less talent. And that's because Josh Allen isn't quite there yet. I think if you can get him to that next step, I do think they need to improve across all those units that you talked about, but good quarterbacks have done more with less. And so it's not a be-all, end-all excuse for Josh Allen that the talent's not there. They are trying to get the talent there. He needs to also take a step forward to increase the production out of all those pieces that they are bringing in and kind of quiet some of that lack of talent conversation that is going to happen. They might not, they might bring in a bunch of wide receivers and not have a better unit next year production wise. That's going to fall on Josh. So let's see what happens. But yeah, he's got to step it up and become that B- player, at least for me next year. I'm jumping off the train, man.
No, I agree, and I think we're going to know. I think they're going to add those pieces to let us find out. All right, let's flip over to the other side of the ball. I'm going to guess some better grades for most of these spots. Let's start up front. Let's start with the defensive line. Jordan Phillips, Shaq Lawson, Ed Oliver, Trent Murphy, Jerry Hughes, 5 different guys with 4.5 or 5+ sacks. Consistent rotation. We had, some moments from Daryl Johnson, signing Corey Liuget late in the year. I think a few more splash plays from Star Lotulelei than what we've seen in the first year or so of his contract. That I think people were a little more excited about what he did, or at least got off his back a little bit more than what we have. And I think that, I don't know that any one guy was phenomenal, but I thought that they played well together. And I thought that the depth that they built and the overall rotation, the fact that we ended up where we did in pressures and in sacks when nobody had a double-digit sack season, I think really speaks well to what they did. And I even count Lorenzo Alexander almost in this group for some of those contributions. I went B+. I thought that they did a nice job. I don't think that we had anyone elite. I think it makes sense that we didn't have any Pro Bowlers, but I think that overall the combined contributions were just below that level, and were a very good group and a good season, that I thought that they put that together, and that with the trend that we saw for Ed Oliver is very exciting for the future. Obviously some things we'll get into in our coming shows with Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson and pending free agents like that. I think that there's some potential for this group to make some key additions, but the people that we have here had a nice season, and I went B+.
I went with B-. I think that this was the weakest group along defense for me. I liked a lot of what we saw. I like the progress, the development we've seen of Shaq Lawson. Now, whether or not that's influenced by money or not, I don't know. I don't really care, but it showed up in production here this year. I didn't love the lack of production we got from Jerry Hughes. We're now hearing that obviously there's some wrist injury. I don't know how much that impacted him. I'm sure it doesn't feel good to have torn ligaments in your wrist and trying to shake off 300-pound men and grab on jerseys and things like that. So I'm sure some of that has something to do with it. The reason mostly I went with the B- though was the middle of the season, right around the bye week, when the Bills were getting gashed in the run game, almost dropped that game to Miami. There was a stretch of about 3 to 4 weeks where all we talked about in the peripheral media and the real media was gap integrity and the run defense and all that stuff. And I put a lot of that blame on the linebackers. Had something to do with it, but a lot of that blame had to do with the defensive line. And there was a major hiccup in the middle of the year for them. I don't know that it ever got corrected. I think a lot of teams went away from running too early in games later in the year. They could have probably run up on them a little bit more. I think it's still a problem with this defense because I think it's the biggest weakness of the defense, and some of the guys in that unit didn't perform to my standards overall. For me, it was the worst unit on this team, defensively speaking. So I went with a B- because it just wasn't up to where I expect it to be with some of the names you have there. Trent Murphy, I expected to take a bigger leap here this year with a full year healthy. I didn't expect as much from Shaq Lawson as we got, but I expected a lot more from Jerry Hughes this year, especially with the addition of Oliver. Guys eating up some space. We've heard that with Star Latulippe eating up space that would free up Jerry Hughes or create some more of those sacks in the middle, and we just haven't seen those things come to fruition, even though the rush rates are high. So B- for that group overall, but I'm obviously happy. It's the second best defense in the NFL, so I'm not going to be too hard on them.
No, and just wait till we add Yannick Ngakoue. It's going to get really exciting.
That's what I'm saying.
Moving on to the linebackers here, I thought, obviously Tremaine Edmonds put up 115 tackles, 11.5 tackles for a loss all over the field. Matt Milano over 100 tackles as well, 9.5 tackles for a loss. Both of them had a sack. Both of them taking the ball away with a pick or a fumble recovery. Lorenzo Alexander counts as a linebacker and did play, 15 or 20 snaps there as needed, but that was it. We were very fortunate that Edmonds missed one game, but for the most part we had our linebackers pretty well. Milano had a short-term hamstring that was during a manageable time period of the season. I thought they were very, very good. A big step forward from Tremaine Edmonds, a lot fewer quarterbacks tricking him with his aggression and things like that. And then Milano was very, very steady. I think that they were, again, just below that Pro Bowl level, and I had them at a B. I thought that they were a net positive all the time and playing well and really improving. And I think both with room to improve, maybe with a little bit of a gap from a depth standpoint behind them that we need to address. But the top two with Edmonds and Milano probably doing a little bit better than that. And overall as a group, I went B.
I went with a B also, and I did same reasons. I think that Edmonds' improvement, fantastic. I love that. I love seeing Matt Milano get back to a level that he was playing at pre-injury. I was a little bit worried about that injury, him being an athletic type guy. I don't want to see any injuries really hinder his ability to be an athletic player. I think the issue I have with that group is I think we've seen Matt Milano's ceiling. I think he's going to hover around this. Like, he has the potential to be a Pro Bowl guy, but he might not ever get the recognition to be a Pro Bowl guy. That's okay. I think in a really good, stout defense, if you can have a top 5 defense for a few years, Milano's the kind of fun guy that this fan base loves and appreciates that may not get the national attention. But I think we've seen about his ceiling. I don't think we've come close to seeing Tremaine Edmonds.
Agreed.
I think he still has so much room for growth, so much potential. It's just really unlimited for him. The mistakes are still there for both of them. They've cleaned up quite a bit of it, and I think they are communicating better than we've seen in the 2 years here. But the mistakes still are there. They are super aggressive dudes, which is going to backfire for a little bit more while they're younger. I think we're going to continue to see some of that next year, but I kind of look at this group like the quarterback group that I do need them. If you're going to maintain a top 5 defense for a few years, I think I need this group particular to take that next step into I need Tremaine Edmonds to be playing at a Pro Bowl level next year for them to continue. It's really hard to keep a top 5 defense for 3, 4, 5 years in the NFL. The Bills' path to winning is doing that. And so in order for them to do that, I think that those guys need to step up just a little bit more than what they're able to do now. And I think that Tremaine can probably lift that group on his own if his development is similar to what we saw this year.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't look any further than their previous stop. We need them to be Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis. That's what you need to sustain this. And I don't know that Milano is Thomas Davis level, but I think he can be a great number 2 and a really solid second linebacker in a core group. And I don't think it's crazy that Tremaine Edmonds could be Luke Kuechly, best linebacker in the league talent. Now, he isn't there yet. He hasn't done that. But I think with his physical gifts and the progression we've seen at age 20 and 21 is just crazy. Oh, yeah. So I think that's a great one. Moving on, things are just continuing to get better here. We'll go to the corners next. And that, the fact that we had 5 talented guys all contribute there, guys like Saran Neal, special teams maven, but was able to plug and play at multiple spots, including stretches against the Jets where he played outside corner really well. Taron Johnson, again, not healthy for every single game, but always in there, as Eric always says, firing his gun, up there, making big hits, and had a positive season. Kevin Johnson making it so apparent that he stole playing time away from Levi Wallace, even though Wallace was playing pretty well. Levi Wallace, again, had a very solid season. I think it's tough. Anytime you're opposite an all-pro corner, you're going to get more attention and more targets than what a normal guy might get. And then Trey White. And Trey is not perfect, but if you have a season where you lead the NFL in interceptions, don't allow any touchdowns, and play as well as he did, he deserved to be an all-pro. And that obviously the second half against DeAndre Hopkins wasn't awesome, and there were some moments here or there, some penalty things, some tackling items with Kevin Johnson and Levi Wallace, some of the health things with Taron Johnson. But overall, was just a great group. I probably had Trey White by himself as an A+, being an all-pro, and the rest of the group pretty good. That I went A- as an overall group as from a corner standpoint, and obviously one of the strengths of the team.
I went with an A. This is my favorite group. I'm going to try to contain myself from gushing about this for a half hour here and stealing the show. I love this group that they've put together. I love the defensive backs group the entire time Sean McDermott's been here. I don't know if it's just him and Bean's eye to scout guys that are going to fit into their system, but it just seems like everyone they bring in plays a role, fits the role, whether it's in the draft or in free agency or guys you don't really think of. They just are able to get the most out of this position. And Trey White, you said he's not perfect. To me, he is. Perfect. I've had him as the MVP of this team multiple years now since he's been here. He's by far, in my opinion, the best Buffalo Bill. And I don't think it's that close. I think he's that talented of a guy. I'm glad he's going to get that recognition. But, yeah, he lifts the group himself. The other guys are flawed. They're not a perfect cornerback room. Levi Wallace has a ton of flaws. He's a very undersized guy. He can easily get muscled. He did get targeted. But all these guys hung in there. When you play with a guy, you mentioned, when you play with a guy like Trey White and you're getting that type of targets, it's easy for that type of thing to get in your head, giving up plays and stuff. You rarely still saw them get beat. This is a unit that didn't give up a big play touchdown throughout the season. They were able to lock down some very good wide receivers all year long, and they weren't shadowing guys at every single game. So it's in my opinion the best unit. It was an argument I had with Marcel Louis-Jacques before the wild card game when we were working. As somebody just heard, I said, no way, this is the most deep position on the team, in my opinion. And, since when, he said, and I said, gosh, look at it, man. Tell me where you don't feel confident. Outside of, obviously, we don't want Trey White to go down, but any other group on this team where if somebody goes down, that the next guy coming in isn't a major drop-off from them. And we saw the development of Sarah Neal and Taron Johnson here this year. And I just feel like they can continue to stockpile this group. They'll get some guy in the 5th round this year that can come in and be a contributing part of this team in the next couple of years to the defensive back group. So it's a nearly perfect unit. If I was going to build my dream unit within the salary cap structure, this would be it. You have Trey White, you have two cornerbacks, a cornerback 2A and 2B, I think, that are pretty much interchangeable. There's really no drop off, in my opinion. They're different guys, they have different flaws, but no significant drop off. I mean, and then you have a solid slot with good depth there too. Sarah Neal that can play inside outside. You can't build it much better within the confines of the NFL salary structure. So kudos to them. I love it. And I'll end my gushing about them before it gets uncomfortable for everybody.
No, I think you're spot on. And again, one of the strongest units overall that you could ask for. And the final one on defense with the safeties, really solid depth. I think that we had some nice pieces to have a luxury of guys like Kurt Coleman, Dean Marlowe, and Jaquan Johnson that you're kind of looking for spaces to let them play, because we had Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer every game all year long ready to go. And this was the opposite of some of the other positions where I don't know that individually any of them had an elite all-pro season by themselves, but the combination of what the interchangeability and variety that Hyde and Poyer can both do, covering for each other, dropping down into the slot, disguising coverages, confusing defenses. They're the definition of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and that what they do together is so valuable that it was the only spot where I actually graded it higher because of what they do as a whole and the versatility that we listed Saran Neal as a corner, even though he's drafted as a safety, and that Dean Marlowe played in the nickel, and that Poyer and Hyde drop down into the slot all the time and coming off blitzes and all the things that they did that I think individually they might have been B pluses each, but I actually had them as an A as a group from a safety standpoint. And I thought that they really held together a ton of what we do. And getting into that third season with McDermott and Frazier's system, I think they're the part that really made it as tricky and as confusing for other teams' quarterbacks as what it was, because they could trail a guy across the screen, making it look like man, but really they were just switching zones because it didn't matter to them because they could both cover both sides of the field. So I was excited about what that is overall. I'm curious, as we're now getting in, both of them were free agent additions. Both of them are going to come up. You know, we have Jordan under contract for 1 more year, Micah for 2 more. They're going to be 30 and 31 when they enter free agency. That's going to be interesting if we think Jaquan Johnson is an answer to something in the future, or whether we need to draft another one there, or whatever combination it is. I'm excited about what they did. I'm excited about what they can still do in 2020, and then we'll see where that goes from beyond there. But I actually marked them as a group as an A because I thought that they did so much well together.
I had him as an A- only because the drop off and the ability that they had a year ago to create turnovers and more of the splash plays from that. They did great last year. That's probably unfair to grade them on that because some of that stuff is just a totally unpredictable part of the game, and that doesn't mean they didn't play well. Safety is probably, in my opinion, I'm sure some people will argue this, I think it's one of the most difficult spots on the defense to evaluate because it doesn't show up in the statistics. You don't want your safety showing up in the stat box. You don't want the safety to lead the team in tackles. That was a problem when Dante Whitner was our leading tackler for years. That means running backs were getting 8 yards
on the field.
And he's there to meet them. So you don't want that to be the case. And in the broadcast, you just don't see a lot of what the safeties are doing. And even when you do watch the All-22, I'll admit it. I'll be the first one to admit it. Sometimes when I'm watching, I don't understand what the safeties are doing. I have to watch it 5-6 times, and I just give up and I say, Eric, tell me what the safeties are doing. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on here? And I think that their role isn't always entirely understood. I think you made a good point that maybe they aren't at the all-pro level, but I do think maybe they aren't there. There's a lot of really good – right now is a great time in the NFL. Yeah. If you like safeties, there's so many good young safeties in the league. I think as far as a duo, though, I don't know that there's a better duo in the league than the duo that the Bills have as far as the ability to communicate, their interchangeability. I think if you talk to coaches, or coaches had a vote in the AP All-Pro team versus writers, I think that you would probably have seen a lot more people talking about Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, because I think what they do shows up on film. I think a lot of people around the league know that they kind of dictate a lot of what happens in this defense pre-snap, and they get guys in position to where they're supposed to be. They're 2 smart, cerebral players. So I think opposing coaches would say, no, those guys are at an all-pro level. They just don't show up in the stats and stuff, but they're at an all-pro level in our preparation to go play the Bills all week. We're signaling out where those guys are on every play. So it's great to have them here. I hope that they outlive their existing contracts. Safeties can play a while.
Yeah.
It's a position, if you take care of your body, a lot of cornerbacks go to extend their careers, or cornerbacks go extend their careers by becoming a safety, because if you can take care of your body and play the position well, you can extend it into your mid to late 30s. So there's an opportunity for them to get another contract here in Buffalo and continue on with that if the money is right. With that being said, I do think that is a sneaky need here in the mid rounds this year, is to find that future, not knowing if you're going to be able to keep both of them or either one of them at all. So you got to find somebody. I don't know that Jaquan Johnson's the answer to anything. We haven't seen. I have no idea who he is. I'm
open to the possibility that he could be something. Sure. There are people out there that are positive.
I'm not banking on it.
That we can let Jordan Poyer walk because we have Jaquan Johnson. I have no idea if he can play to play, the interchangeability and the disguising that he does with Mike Hyde. I have no idea. And I don't have any reason to assume that he can, but maybe he's a piece. But I agree, adding another spot there to that to give us just a second lottery ticket would be great. And I honestly kind of hope that they keep them both around and are able to find a number that makes sense.
Yeah, that's where I'm at is let's maybe get a couple more young guys and hope that we hit on one or two of them. I mean, we can find another Micah Hyde in free agency if we ever need to. But yeah, to just assume the next guy up's going to do it at the level that these two are doing, I think that's a false way to look at it. And until I see it, I'm not going to feel good about thinking of the day those two aren't there together.
Yeah. Our last spot before we go on to the awards, I just put the special teams as a whole. Stephen Hauschka had a really rough stretch in the middle, started out okay, finished okay. Corey Bojorquez actually set a record for the most punts downed inside the 20 for the team, but was never consistent, always had a pretty rough net average, never had great consistent hang time, and would alternate between 63-yard bombs and 36-yard shanks. And that's great. That comes out to an average of 50, but that's just not doable to be able to make that work play in, play out. I thought Andre Roberts was a really net positive, and you and I would talk all the time about the hidden yardage of balls that he didn't let bounce that net you an extra 6 or 8 yards, and those little wiggles that he would do to get the couple extra yards aggressively going forward. I hate it when return guys are east-west guys. He's one of the rare genuine north-south returners. It just gets the ball, goes upfield, gets the yards. At one point, he was leading the NFL in all return yards and ended up well above average. So we went from a really poor special teams to now average, and I had them overall at a C, probably brought up a little bit by Roberts and trying to take into account that Hauschka wasn't rough the whole season, but that we still have plenty of room to improve, and that I wouldn't mind having a new punter and additional positive depth to help the rest of the special teams unit here, that hopefully Roberts can break one next year.
Yeah, I was a C. It's a meh. It's like they were fine. They weren't a problem. Bills lost games because of special teams in 2018.
Yeah, we literally lost the Houston game in 18 because of it.
Yeah. Special teams was a problem where you were losing football games. It was a constant thing that you and I were talking about almost every week after the games of just mistake after mistake. They cleaned up a lot of that. There were some lingering issues of a new coach, getting a new special team system in. But I think there's enough to be happy about this unit going into next year. I think I love the development of Sarah Neal as a special teams guy. I think he can be at the level of some of your better special teams players. I don't think you're ever going to have a Tasker again because special teams just isn't that important as it used to be, and you just the rules limit it. But I think he could be a poor man's Matthew Slater type of a guy, like just a consistent guy that is down there, doesn't allow any coverage. I think he has the ability to do that. Robert Foster carved out himself. He kept Duke Williams off the field because of what his abilities were on special teams specifically. So they've done some nice things. There's some good stuff kind of baked into the special teams unit, but we didn't see Andre Roberts break it. We didn't see the consistency from Hauschka and a one that we could have gotten that 11th win. Maybe, like if he just had a little bit more consistency throughout the year. I just want a consistent punter. I don't need a big leg. I just want a guy that I just don't feel like is going to shank it at any moment. And I just want consistency at that position. Maybe it's years of Mormon spoiling me throughout his prime years, but I just want to go back to having a good punter that we don't have to talk about a lot. So they're a C for me, and I hope that they bring in competition across, I guess, everything except for Andre Roberts and Sarah Neal, and just see how the unit shakes out. Obviously, long snapper, I think they're set at 2. But, yeah, especially the kickers, I'm all for whatever competition they got to get here in the summer and let them go over to the turf field and just kick balls for days and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree completely. Let's get to the exciting finish here. We have 4 awards. So we're going to go through our best free agent, our most improved player, our rookie of the year, and our MVP. So we'll start from a best newcomer, best breakout performance, the best free agent in addition to the team. This won't be any surprise for me. I did give honorable mention to John Feliciano and even Kevin Johnson, just from a value standpoint, guys that we didn't expect anything of, who signed just barely above minimum deals and ended up being legitimate positive contributors. But for me, this is a slam dunk. John Brown, I think he was, even when I was being optimistic and hopeful in the preseason, he ended up being all of that and more. Didn't finish as strong as I would like, had maybe 3 catches for 45 yards down the stretch when he started out, a lot more of those 7 for 90 games along the midway there. But overall was a really nice addition for Josh Allen, and I think somebody we can count on going forward.
I love that pick. Mid-season, I was on our friend Pat Moran's show, and I picked Feliciano mid-season to be my guy for my best free agent pickup at the mid-season mark. I love Brown. I think Brown's a fantastic. I knew you were going to pick Brown, so I went with Quentin Spain.
Nice.
I think what Spain did was great. He was a little bit ahead where I thought when we first got him and people were saying, hey, this is his PFF grade and he didn't allow a sack and all that stuff. I was like, well, I don't know. We'll see. Like, I think he'll be a better run blocker than pass blocker, but he did a really good job this year. He's a guy that I'd like to get everybody back. I'd love to have Shaq and Jordan Phillips and all those guys back. But I think after hearing Brandon Beane speak, I think Quinn Spain's a priority to bring back. And I don't know that there's a guy in free agency that they can get for the right deal that's going to be a vast improvement from him. And that's good. That's a good problem to have. And Eric talked about a lot of the communication that he set along the line this year and that type of improvement to the offensive line. So I think that unit improved as a whole, and a lot of that was because of the additions of either Feliciano or Spain. And for me, either one of those guys was a coin toss for the best free agent pickup, so I'm going with Spain just today. If you would ask me tomorrow, it might have been Feliciano.
I like it. It's well deserved. And going into the next one, most improved player. This was a tough one for me, and I went back and forth. I had three guys who I thought were all in the running. I was debating between Shaq Lawson and Tremaine Edmonds, who I think both had really strong steps forward, legitimately really made a positive difference. And I actually went with Deion Dawkins. And I think that Deion took a huge step forward from a consistency standpoint and being the leader of that offensive line and really stepping into a very good left tackle. I don't know if he's at franchise left tackle, $16 million a year level, but he made paying him a much easier choice for me, and that I'm not worried about overpaying him if we extend him and it's more money than I'd like. I'm not concerned about that. I feel good that he should be here and part of this team for a long, long time, and that's a reassuring thing just from the value of that position.
I agree. I was hemming and hawing a little bit on this one between Dawkins and Shaq Lawson. Yeah. The reason I didn't go with Dawkins only for me was I think he's probably been the same player that he was his first year. The talent around him dissipated the year before, and then he got back to adequate guys that should be in the NFL. And I think that's what you can expect. If you have good offensive linemen that know their responsibilities, that can play the position, this is the Deion Dawkins you're going to get. And I think that just getting him back to having a talented player next to him, but his improvement's real. I'm not taking away his ability to improve or his ability to keep his head in it. It's hard for young players to have a down year like that. And he took that really hard at the end of last year and some of the mistakes that he made. And he knew he wasn't playing at his best at all times. And I think he came back and he showed that. And I think it showed in the team by them naming him a captain, that being voted on by the players, that he put in that work to show every member of his team that he wasn't going to take plays off. He was going to be that guy for the team. So I think that's a good one. I went with Shaq Lawson. I think that he was the best defensive lineman on this team. I know Jordan Phillips had more sacks. I think Shaq did it at a more consistent rate, play in, play out. He was a better run defender on this team. I am going to pound the table all offseason until he signs an extension. I don't think he'll ever be a splash player for this team. He's never going to be a 10-sack guy. I want to keep.
And 6.5 isn't nothing. 6.5 is not nothing. A legitimate number.
And he got there a number of other times. He was in the backfield, and Sean McDermott said it or Leslie Frazier, I forget which one. Somebody said, Shaq brings the deuce on this deep. He sets that tone for us. And once they said that, bring that guy back. Whatever we got to do, let's get a reasonable deal, get him back. He's not going to break the bank. Get him back. I can live with him and no Trent Murphy. I couldn't live with myself if we had Trent Murphy and not Shaq Lawson. I watched him go somewhere else. So he had the biggest jump in improvement this year, and I'm so happy for him because Sean McDermott has not been kind and Brandon Beane has not been kind to guys they didn't draft. And those guys are not here, and those guys didn't get playing time, and he's earned every single lick of playing time that he's gotten on this team, and good for him, man.
Absolutely. And I think going into our next award is another one that was a fun one, that it was hard. I'm glad Rookie of the Year wasn't easy. And when you have a draft class where you have so many contributors, that's a great problem to have. That's really exciting to see that we had that many guys contributing. I think Dawson Knox had a nice season, but obviously this was a debate between Ed Oliver and Devin Singletary. I think Oliver has more upside. I think that he has a chance to be a dominant force at a premium position. and a really, really impactful player. But I just couldn't convince myself that Devin Singletary didn't have the best season out of the rookies. And that, again, he's always the one I bring up that I was as wrong about as anybody. I was so upset on draft night. I wanted a pass rusher. I wanted Chase Winovich. I wanted Jalen Ferguson, and didn't want this 5'7" running back who ran a 4.66. And what are we going to do with him? And man, is he fun. And it's going to be exciting to see what he does going forward. And he was my rookie of the year from probably my biggest surprise out of those guys.
This one, I should give it to Singletary and just agree with you, but for the sake of the show, I'm going to go with Ed Oliver for this one. But I think Ed Oliver has a case in the sense that progress as a rookie is different position to position. I think it's a little bit easier to come into the league as a running back and make contributions in year one that are tangible material contributions to your team, things that show up in the stat book. You can have a good rookie rushing season. It's much harder to do that at the defensive tackle position, especially when guys on your own team are outplaying you for snaps. And I think also we saw, Ed Oliver hit a bump in the road this year in his development, take a step back. I was very intrigued by that kind of process and watching how that played out, because we heard about his lack of coachability. We heard that this guy was a problem for coaching staffs like that. That was his biggest knock in the draft process, the whole coat scandal thing. Like this guy can't be coached. For him to be able to step back, that because he wasn't playing well, watch another teammate outperform him as a top pick with the expectations that come with that, regroup himself and become a better player in that short span of a time, told me a lot about who Ed Oliver is and what he means to this team. And he did make a pretty substantial jump when he got back into the regular fold of the lineup. And I loved what I saw. I think he finished the year stronger than anybody did. I think that, he probably had the biggest ascension towards the end of the year, in my opinion. And I'm really excited to see what he can do in year two. So I think there's a case. I don't think it's as clear and cut and dry as maybe people think if you just look at the stats. I think Singletary made more of an impact to the season and wins than Ed Oliver did in the 2019 season, but I think you can make a good case for Ed Oliver.
Yeah, and I think that there's some exciting things there. You made the comment that Shaq Lawson was the best defensive lineman on the season. I think that's accurate. I think if you ask the team who is the most impactful defensive lineman in those final handful of games, I think it was Ed Oliver.
Oh, yeah.
And that I think that he was there. And if you go back and look, I mean, the very best defensive tackles in the NFL, and you're looking at the Chris Joneses of the world and the, Fletcher Cox and Cameron Hayward and guys who are, genuinely dominant players that are now all pro type defensive tackles, that's the exact same kind of season that Ed Oliver had. And you look at the number of sacks they had as a rookie, the number of tackles, the number of games they played and games started, it's really, really in line with that. They all took their big steps forward in their second or their third or fourth season to where they got into that role. And I think that we have a really bright future ahead of us with them.
Big time.
And now for the final one, I'm simply going to say, I know I have the same answer as you. The floor is yours.
Brandon Beane is my MVP of the thing. I had to ask you about this one because I was like, he's not a player. And I know there's going to be people that, it's the player. Brandon Beane's the most important part of this franchise, and it's not even close, in my opinion. Him putting this roster together, 2019 was kind of his pet project. He has been working so hard to reframe this roster. And like you often say, taking the medicine in 2018 and just having to sit in that press box up there and look at the lack of talent on that team. And he alluded to that maybe he did a disservice to Josh early on and not getting the talent, but some of that was part of taking the medicine, sitting on that dead cap, not being able to make moves, being restricted, and having people question some of the moves you make. For him to be able to sit back, let all of that play out, and then present this 2019 team where he had all these new starters on the offensive side of the ball, two good hits of draft classes now have come into this team and made solid contributions. He has the trust of the city, the organization. He's put people in position. And even after games, guys going up and saying Brandon Beane's the real thing. This organization believes in this man. He has turned it all around. They're in a great position here heading into the offseason. I think he has a chance to win back-to-back MVPs with how he handles here, this offseason. This is going to be another big one for him. But the foundation that has been laid, culture is all on Sean McDermott, but the business side of it and the smart decision-making and staying steady with all that is totally led by Brandon Beane. I think that he's building his own GM tree, if you will. Yeah. I think there's going to be an executive tree that comes out of the Bills organization that you start to see spread throughout the league. I think that the Bills are ahead of the trend on how they get things done in a front office standpoint, and it's all led by Brandon Beane, and so he's my most important person in the entire Buffalo football organization.
No, I think it's a great call. And we both mentioned that, Tre'Davious White's the most valuable player on the team and the best player on the team. And from a player standpoint, earned that. But when you brought that up earlier in the prep, I thought it was great. And I think it really speaks to the turnaround where there's literally 3 players who are still on the roster from beforehand and what they turned that into. The fact that you talk about how painful it is to rip down to the studs and rebuild and how long that takes. They made the playoffs twice in that stretch. They have a winning record overall in that stretch. And to be able to combine that and put that all together is really, really exciting. Not to mention that he now has the best opportunity he's going to have to be able to retain talent and add talent at the same time. $90 million in cap space, 9 draft picks, no marquee players leaving. Some players we'd like to have back, discussions with Quentin Spain and Shaq Lawson and things like that matter. But the fact that you have the choice, like if we lose any of them, we can replace them with other guys that are out there, free agents, plus the draft picks you have, and then getting into the extensions of the guys that you bring back. I thought it was a great choice and really, really smart way to approach this and makes me even more excited for the coming months. So as we get ready to sign off here in these coming months, you're going to see some exciting things coming up here. Obviously, Aaron and I are going to do plenty of mock drafts. We're going to do free agent sessions. Aaron's going to be super excited to talk about contracts and finances with me. We're going to go into some things. We have a squad of people heading down to the Senior Bowl that's going to be really exciting. Then we'll get into our position previews and position reviews. We'll do some live mock drafts like we've done in the past. So a lot of really exciting stuff coming up that we're going to get into. We'll stick on a relatively once a week rotation. We may have a week or so here where we have some stuff going on and may not be exactly on that pace, but roughly once a week during the offseason, we'll bring something to you. But overall, really excited. Today was a great way to kind of bring some closure on the season, and I couldn't imagine doing with anybody better. So appreciate your time tonight, Aaron.
Yeah, whatever. I'm taking off until April Fool's Day, and then I'll be back. No, it's going to be – I want everybody to kind of just stay with us through this. Not everybody kind of stays and keeps putting out content here throughout the offseason. It's a tough time. We're going to come up with some cool content. Now Greg's working on a fun content schedule and some fun guests and stuff that we'll have coming up here to keep you hyped about the Bills offseason, because it's going to be a fun one. So I'm looking forward to all this process of leading up and getting excited for the big fun offseason we're about to have this spring.
Absolutely, man. And again, the chat was awesome tonight. A lot of really good suggestions and ideas, mainly the ones that agreed with things that I said. But really appreciate everything that you guys go through here. If you want to be a part of that, come join us at cover1.net. Check out everything we have going on. Aaron brought it up earlier. Draft time is an awesome time to jump aboard. We have a full squad of guys focusing just on that. And it's not always just Bill-centric. They have, really in-depth breakdowns of everybody that's out there for a lot of different teams. So come and check it out. Join what's going on here, become a premium member. You can jump in the Slack channel, jump in all the different things that we have going on there, and it's a really exciting time. If you want to come find me on the Twitter machine at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. And where can the people find you, my friend?
You can find me at Aaron Quinn 716, and I look forward to it, man. I feel like I've had an attitude swing since the season ended on Twitter, and I just don't care. I'm in a good mood, so now's a good time to follow me, because you might think I'm actually a decent human being.
No, I've been really impressed. You pivoted into optimistic offseason mode really quickly, and I think had a great perspective on it while everybody else was wallowing in self-pity and frustration. And that, being realistic that this was a good season. This was an exciting season that exceeded expectations. And that, granted, it got exciting as we went going. It doesn't mean that last game didn't hurt, but I was really impressed with your perspective and how you were able to do that so quickly. It took me an extra day or so to catch up with you, but I'm right on board as well.
Yeah, no, it might not be healthy to compartmentalize your emotions and stuff in a way like that, but no, I don't know, man. Maybe it's just the frustration of my entire adult life never having a good team to cheer for. So I'm going to enjoy this time that my team had a good successful year, and that I know that they like you said, the 90 million and 9 picks to load up and do some more fun stuff. I'm really excited about the prospect of what that's going to look like under a Brandon Beane regime. So nothing but excitement coming from me these days.
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up for today, thank you for joining us for the season grades and the award show. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.